Good afternoon and welcome to our session. Andrea and I are going to take you on a journey of the Viva deployment at Agri. Andrea, if you'd like to sort of introduce yourself and who you are and what you do at Agri.
So I'm Andrea. I'm a program manager for Origin Enterprises PLC, of which Agri UK are part of. This is going to be the case study that we're looking into today.
Yeah. My name is Wes Hackett. I'm Chief Technology Officer at a UK-based Office 365 product company called AddIn365. I'm also a Microsoft MVP, specializing in Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and those collaboration platforms that Jeff was showcasing this morning. So Andrea and I have been working together for over a year now, deploying some great solutions into the Agri experience. And we're going to take you on that journey this afternoon. We're going to explain a little bit of the background about why it was such a challenging project. We're going to talk about how to get a great employee experience out of your Microsoft 365, Teams, SharePoint, Viva connections, etc. And we're going to show you some live demos of those experiences that Agri are using day to day. And we're going to talk about each of those as we go. So, Andrea, Agri, a well-known brand name in that particular industry, but for those of us in the room less familiar, can you sort of tell us a bit more about Agri?
So Agri is an agricultural services brand within the UK. We are specialized in offering strategic advice to around 20,000 farmers within the UK, as well as offering technology and products to them.
Yeah.
So I am personally not an agricultural specialist to any means. I have worked with people within the agricultural business, but I would suggest we hear from some of my colleagues from Agri.
Absolutely.
A bit about the company.
Okay, so let's watch the Agri show reel.
High-yielding crops are linked to lower greenhouse gas emissions and can maximise the non-crop land available for biodiversity to thrive. To meet global food requirements of the future, either more land needs to be put into food production with consequential loss of biodiversity, or the yield gap in productive regions like Eastern Europe needs to be closed. In Western Europe, the yield increases seen in the last 80 years are tailing off. But technologies such as precision farming, digital tools, biosolutions, gene editing, lower carbon fertilisers and critically improved understanding of soil health will all deliver greater efficiencies. Our strategy for sustainable agriculture is about farming to meet economic and food production needs, whilst addressing the environmental imperatives of protecting biodiversity, enhancing soil health and aiming for net zero. To support this sustainable green revolution, we are implementing a nurturing growth strategy to drive real change and the adoption of more sustainable farming practices with our customers. In order to deliver these commitments, we need to upskill our agronomists and sales staff to enable holistic support around environmental issues, soil management and regenerative farming methods. Working with industry bodies in the UK, we are updating and creating the in-field training that will help lead farming through this transition process.
Sustainable, secure food production and a competitive, thriving farming industry is critical to all of us. As trusted partners, our strategy will assist our customers to navigate the complexities and the competing priorities faced by agriculture today and into the future, directed by evidence-based research and collaborations.
So that's a brilliant example of the complexity of modern agriculture. And I think when we first started working together, we did have a bit of a geek off because obviously as technologists, we were super excited about M365 and as agronomists in the field, they were excited about crop yields and fertilizers and all these things we knew nothing about. So the two teams have worked really closely together to kind of get a joint understanding. And one of the complexities that the Agri project brought was the sheer diversity of audiences. So can you just talk a bit more about some of those audiences, what their needs were, and in how we dealt with each one independently.
So if we look at Agri, we can split the audiences in two main groups. I'm going to start with a simpler one, the office-based staff. So behind the entire industry, you have an army of people that work in the office in order to support the agronomists in the field. So from an office staff perspective, requirements for this project were quite simple. An access to a limited amount of data and information, while accessing the system from an office desktop with good internet connectivity. A simple picture. But we go into the more complex side of the agronomists. Here, we're talking about a smaller amount of people, but with rather complex requirements. So agronomists, for the people that have not necessarily interacted with this type of roles before, they are mostly field-based. So they are the people focused on doing field assessments of every single crop of our 20,000 customers, and then offering advice on the back of it and creating a very clear prescription of the products that need to be applied on every single field. You can imagine from that these people can be very easily compared to crop doctors. So they either need to have a mind full of information that is always updated, or have very easy access to information on a digital workplace. This was the issue that we have described to AddIn365.
Yeah, and that immediately gave us a challenge. How do we have a one-size-fits-all that's unique to everybody? So we've got a juxtaposition there. We've got a seesaw we're trying to balance. We've got lots of different competing needs. We've got lots of different working places. So I think this challenge was really sort of made even more fun by where we started from a technology platform. So Agri, when we first engaged, were running a SharePoint 2013 on-premises intranet. And I, without being rude, can describe that as one giant document library. So they had roughly 100,000 plus documents of deep technical intellectual property in a very well-structured folder-based document library that everybody was using. So it was like a giant network share, but in a SharePoint environment. And then there were some dotted around sort of SharePoint sites with some fairly old and out-of-date content. And very quickly, we discovered that people's belief of finding anything once they put it into SharePoint was zero. So we've got complex needs, we've got a hard-to-use old system, and I think that gave us actually a real springboard for an improvement to that experience. We also looked at the engagement features. So when you think about a digital employee experience, what you're trying to do is build better engagement. You're trying to make sure your staff feel A, connected to the organization, and B, they've got tools where they can share their knowledge. The agronomy team are incredibly smart people, as you described them, crop doctors, right? They have years and years of experience, and how do you share that amongst those teams? So we had a kind of challenge there around the initial technology platform. So where do you start? Planning. Like you definitely don't go into these things just headlong rush. You have to think about what you're trying to achieve and go through that. So we embarked upon something that AddIn365 start a project like this with, which is a thing called success definition. So we spoke to the leadership team, we spoke to representatives across the business, and we got a better view of what the pain points and objectives that the intranet and digital employee experience were trying to solve. So that's a good starting point for any project like this. If you're looking at a complex organization with different needs, and then you've got the platform that was chosen. So Andrea, describe Office 365. You chose that as a platform. What drove that decision?
It was very important for us to just follow the same technology stack that we have already chosen for the company. We're not necessarily IT-centric. We're an agricultural business. So we needed a simple solution that would stack on top of the systems that we already had, but also that provided the flexibility that we required to build a solution for our agronomists. That's when SharePoint Online was clearly the solution for us. We just needed to figure out how do we build on it in order to have the simplest and best solution for our staff.
Yeah. And then another complex moment was the rebranding, the brand refresh that Agri undertook mid-project. So talk to me about that.
Yes, unfortunately, this is an onion with multiple peels. So while we've embarked on this project, I threw another bomb on AddIn's plate, which was, oh, by the way, we're also kind of doing a rebranding exercise. It's worth mentioning that Agri was built over multiple years from acquisitions. We're a group of companies, so obviously we always acquire different companies. With different companies being bought into the Agri brand, so came some historical elements of marketing and brand image. So we wanted to just unify everything. Now, we needed a partner that could take the creative liberty of building a platform for us that would follow that image that we were trying to portray internally, as well as at some point externally to our customers.
Yeah, so that's an exciting challenge as well. So here we are, layers upon layers of cool and interesting things to work with. How do you make a consumer-grade experience feel branded within Microsoft 365? And then you mentioned the length of time that someone works for the organization, and communicating those values as mergers and acquisitions happen. So how is the platform aiming to sort of talk to the communication and the values proposition for an employee?
So Agri is quite a well-known brand in the UK market, very well known in the rural places. You know, you see an Agri lorry, that's well known by the farmers. And with that comes a history of quality and the value that we provide to our customers. We weren't necessarily that good at portraying that internally with our own staff. So what we wanted was to take that value that the customers are seeing in us and bring it in and show it to our internal staff as well. That was quite a main goal for us, especially when it came to the onboarding of new staff that we had. We've seen the need of showing them who they're working for and what's the core of the company.
Yeah. So that values piece, the brand, the alignment, that engagement with the organization starts off very early in the project. We're working together to make sure that that's coming across in every element of experience that the employees are using. So I'm going to pause on some visuals. These are artwork designs very early in the project where we took this ever-evolving brand and we've applied it to the SharePoint Online experience. So that application is done through the AddIn365 Creative and Page Kit elements that are bolted inside to that SharePoint Online experience. And it's allowing us to leverage all that great investment from Microsoft, all the web parts, the news web part and events web part and things like that, and bolster it with some extra extensions like locations capabilities from Google, branded elements that you can see in these designs. So we're bringing a consumer-grade experience within that Office 365 SharePoint Online tenant. So that artwork, each of the site types has one of those worked up. Now, how useful was it to see this sort of stuff early on in the project?
Oh, it was essential for us. I think it's worth mentioning as a customer that we went through quite the process until we ended up working with AddIn. We had about 5 POCs on our table, none of them working for us because everyone was posting a custom solution, and we definitely did not want that. We wanted something that we can hand over to our department owners to be able to populate themselves. We wanted to move the ownership of the intranet solution from being IT-based to being department content owner-based. So having those templates, having the page kit that AddIn have created was essential for us because we said, right, this is a solution that we can actually hand over to the business owners that might have not necessarily interacted until that point with a platform.
Yeah. And so we start by partnering together. We embark upon this jointly. We go and do that discovery. And then we get into how complex is your information architecture. So for anyone in the room that's not familiar with the term information architecture, it kind of means where is the content going to live, who owns it, and how is it going to be used. That's the simplest way to describe that concept. So I mentioned already, we found 100,000 documents. So we're going to come back to that particular problem. But we also tried to look at how is Agri structured? How does it support the way that an agronomist or an office-based member of staff works? And what we found is it didn't. The people that created content housed their content in their bucket. And as an employee, I had to walk across lots of different buckets to do one job. So I had a lot of time spent calling people, emailing people, going into a network share, finding something in SharePoint, going into a system. And we had to kind of answer that challenge. So we did a pivot. We moved to what we call a task-based architecture. So I'm a real strong advocate of this kind of approach because it means the content owners are bringing their content together in the way that an employee thinks about it. So we're going to see the Employee Centre, and I won't steal our own thunder on that, but the Employee Centre is a brilliant example where multiple departments and areas of the business contribute to one place and bring it together. So from our architecture, we've got this task-based thing. We've identified how people are working, we're thinking about the buckets of content they need, and then we come back to that template idea. The idea that using those AddIn365 assets and delivery templates, we gave everybody a Word document. Please write the content you're going to stick in your site. We gave that on day one. So they're not waiting for their site to arrive, they're kind of already authoring, they're working through that stuff. And that allowed the speed of the project to be really effective as well. So once we got those sites up, we had this migration challenge. So what additional value were we collectively looking for when we did that migration?
So first of all was the restructuring of the content. Wes has mentioned 100,000 documents, highly technical, from which IT understood maybe 1%, because let's face it, once you go into a technical document, you get lost, that we needed to restructure in the new architecture that we've built. Having in the background departments now having crop areas. So we needed, let's say, the guidance behind how we can shift all of this information into the new solution without being just a lift and shift.
Yeah. So that migration point, we've got the design, we've got the targets. We've now got to migrate and manipulate those 100,000 documents, do better tagging, bring up that metadata and drop it into the right locations to give the context that we're now looking for. So we want to make the agronomy team and the office-based teams' jobs easier. We've got to do a little bit of groundwork. We've got to move things properly as we do the migration point. So we executed a collection of work packages around the migration that kind of restructured that content. And then once it was into the right spot, we can leverage it. We can get more value out of that content. And we introduced Alfred, which is the chatbot experience from the Content Confidence Kit around, how do we look into those 100,000 and scale an SME? So if you think about the agronomy team, they're kind of out in the field, aren't they? We saw it in the video. Nobody was at a desk. So how do you make the tacit knowledge that these science specialists have available 24/7? Chatbot's a really brilliant example of how to do that. And then finally, when Viva Connections announced its general availability, we were instantly ready to deploy that and the associated dashboard. And again, we're going to talk about the dashboard in much more detail shortly. But we're combining a big ecosystem of content to change that employee experience. We've started from task-based architecture. We've moved through to visual alignment to the brand and a consistency that allows people to understand where they are and what they're trying to do. We've migrated the existing content into the cloud to make it more highly available, more secure, and restructured it to support the tasks being allocated. And then we've leveraged AI and the Viva Connections suite to enable that multi-device, that 24/7 scaling, the hybrid nature of the organization. So we approach this whole thing together very holistically, and we've looked at all the different challenges that different parts of that business undertook. So let's take a step into the actual solution. We've got some cherry-picked elements we're going to talk through. And we're going to start by looking at the SharePoint Online intranet, the traditional intranet that many organizations have. So just a quick show of hands. Who's got a SharePoint intranet, built a SharePoint intranet, uses a SharePoint intranet? Okay, so most people in the room. Who in the room's using Viva Connections? Okay, about half. Who in the room's using the Viva Connections dashboard with tiles? about a quarter of the room. Brilliant. Okay, so what we have SharePoint Online, brilliant for publishing news, content. It supports teams in the collaborative world, so you've got this better together story. You've got Viva Connections, that employee experience suite that Jeff talked about this morning, as an entryway to that experience. It's now bringing the content from the intranet into the flow of work. You don't have to leave Teams to get the intranet experience. And Dashboard is enabling a highly customized experience of applications and information, primarily through the mobile device, and that's what we're going to see. So, Andrea, before we sort of see the demo, let's talk about the objectives that the homepage was sort of tasked with solving.
Well, I think one of the statements that our agronomists made when we were doing the interviews with them was, we want to go into the internet, 2 clicks, and we got to the information that we require. That was one of the issues that they've put on our table to solve. So the whole idea of the homepage was to be functional before anything else, to have the right information for our agronomists to be able to navigate through very quickly and access the information that they required. Also, what we wanted to put in front was the news, because we publish daily at this point in time. Right now it's winter, yes. So you can imagine crops are growing, things are happening. They need to be at all points in time informed about how to deal with the certain difficulties that they might need to overcome in the field.
Absolutely. So I'll just run the show reel again. Andrea, it was really interesting, wasn't it? Because some of the behaviours that we were supporting here is that kind of, I need to know when I need to be at a desk, which for an office worker, even in a hybrid scenario of working from home, you sometimes, there's a little gap in the day where you might be doing something else and you kind of might miss things. So the news and the events capability within that home experience was really, really powerful, because it gave those that weren't at a desk the opportunity to participate, because they knew if I just left an hour later or I came home an hour earlier, I could join the all hands. I could actually participate in the live event. And it was the first time the organisation had that visibility across the campus. So the homepage solved some very specific business objectives. We didn't try a one-size-fits-all. We didn't try and put everything and every link on that homepage. It really does just address news and updates, visibility of the news, and at the bottom it's got the latest technical documents, which is using audience targeting and search capabilities along the bottom. So next up, Employee Center. We've talked about this task-based architecture, but the Employee Center is probably the easiest and most obvious place that actually comes to life.
Yeah, it's definitely the place in which we wanted to bring both groups together and unify the employee experience. As an employee, no matter if you're office-based or if you're one of the agronomists, you want to access pretty much the same level of information when it comes to your own person, whether it's from a finance perspective or information regarding mental health, the values of the company. Everything needed to be in one single space that would encompass your experience as an employee of Agri. That's where this idea came from.
Yeah. So we've brought together lots of different departments contributing content. You've got finance, you've got HR, you've got health and safety. They've all brought their bits. So rather than you going around with your basket, grabbing bits from here and there and everywhere, this employee center, they've gone to the effort to do that ahead of time. So if you want to come in and there's certain things you're trying to do, they're right there at your fingertips. So this is probably the second most footfalled part of the whole experience outside of the technical content. This is where a lot of employees are coming at least 2 or 3 times a week. And it's the stories. It's understanding the career pathways and the access to the HR team and training, all those kind of pieces from one single place. So it really has become an employee center. So next up, we're going to look at the showcase for locations. So locations, farming, it sounds pretty complicated.
Yeah, we do have across the country somewhere around 40 warehouses and offices. And there were 2 main reasons why we wanted a location-specific page. First of all, majority of our warehouses are rather remote, some of them having 2-3 employees maybe. So they can at some point feel rather disconnected from the rest of the company. They don't necessarily have a space where they put their own news, while they can communicate with the rest of the company. So we wanted, with the new solution, to bring everyone together, to feel like everyone is part of this company, everyone has something to say, and put forward to the rest of their colleagues. A second reason for this was also management. So if someone needs to travel or plan ahead, so call maybe one of the warehouses before they arrive there or one of the offices, they needed a space where they can access the information regarding to every single location within the company.
Yeah, and I think that again is going back to that task orientation. You saw in the demonstration that this is a scenario using where an employee is on the desktop and they're focused on pre-booking that hotel. They're looking for a location because they're going to visit that particular location. They need to stay. They've got instant access to that kind of Google hotel search experience. So again, we brought some sort of consumer friendliness to the experience by leveraging Google. It's trusted. People will see that map and they go, that's a Google map. I understand that the information I'm seeing, I trust. So again, you've got that connectivity between what they're used to in their private and social lives with the stuff that their enterprise is now providing. And it just bolsters and uplifts that whole experience across the two. So the final sort of desktop example, Crop Center. So remember, we've got these 100,000 documents. And before we sort of show the solution, I just want to delve into kind of how we got here, because it was a pretty fun roller coaster at one point. So obviously, we had to engage with the agronomy team. So that's 200 plus people. So what were the steps we went through?
Well, I think we've started with the interviews first, in which we basically brought together a series of agronomists, and you were hoping to find some common ground when you had them all in the room.
Yep.
Unfortunately, that was not the case. As we delved into the situation, we very clearly found out that every single agronomist had their own unique way to get to the information that they required. So that was quite a challenge that was thrown back at Wes to be able to find a solution.
Yeah, and there was a kind of easy way out. We could have taken all the 200 interviews and just put everything in one page, and that would have been 1,000 links, really not very good for any particular person. But it would have been the traditional way of just tackling the problem. It's like, okay, we've got big technical document library, let's have a technical center, let's think about it from IT's point of view, managing the documents, okay, there's filters and hard. So we took some fairly bold steps. We went away, we did a lot of whiteboarding at this point, I think, with some agronomist team members that sort of said, hey, yeah, I'd like to try this, contribute and try. And we came up with this idea that there's actually 3 or 4 different pathways that they were regularly using in. Now, an agronomist tends to be a specialist in a particular crop or crop family. So that was a great candidate. We looked at that and we said, okay, if we would take these 200 plus people and we said, okay, cereals, salads, arable crop types, that we were able to then sort of narrow the field. We could have 5 or 6 different clusters of information, and that would at least narrow the searching and narrow the findability. So what we've introduced is a crop center template. So for any crop type, you can deploy this pattern into the environment, set it up with the particular type of crop you're looking for, and it narrows the field of view of the 100,000 documents. And again, some additional complexity was a label of a fertilizer product might be used to service 7 or 8 crops. So it doesn't live in one particular bucket. So we again had to think about how do we tag and how do we get the information architecture underneath in the document library to support that ability to kind of put these vectors on. So let's take a look at what we came up with. So the crop center, firstly, there's a crop center for every crop type that Agri service. And you volunteer yourself as an interested party. You join an audience for those crop types. So in the agronomy section at the top, I am only nominated myself against 4 particular crop types. So I immediately narrow my field. And then I come into wheat, and I'm greeted by a wheat-centric experience. And that was game changing. When we actually brought this back to the agronomy team, it was kind of jaws on the floor moment. They were like, wow, this is the first time ever anybody's thought about it from our perspective. So while they still all want to work uniquely, they can at least start from a fairly similar starting line. So we've exposed technical documents, nutrition, seed, all of this incredibly valuable IP that Agri own and generate in a context that makes sense for the employee that's using it, back to that task-based architecture. And this is deliberate. This is very much to support what we're about to see in the Viva Connections dashboard, because without this, some of those capabilities we'll see in the dashboard just were too hard. We have to at least narrow the field, and we have to provide some context. We also introduced collections. Can you tell us a bit more about collections?
Well, that was quite an interesting concept that we've brought together. And it was mainly focused around the idea of seasonality, which is one of the first variables that, let's say, influences the way that our agronomist works, but also support for the newly invested agronomists. We as a company do like getting people in that are quite fresh out of university and supporting them through the training that is required in order to become a full-fledged agronomist, which takes about 3 years. So we needed a way in which we can surface curated information for them to be able to just pick an action, either in the field or with the customer.
Yeah, and that's really exciting, because when you're growing that talent, you're retaining that talent, supporting them, using the tacit knowledge that the more experienced staff members have got to support the growth of the newer staff, it just makes it a bit more of a connected experience. The engagement between those two groups of employees is much stronger, because the new employees feel supported and the existing employees feel valued in their contribution. So we looked at the dashboard, and again, we went back to that problem space of, well, it's a dashboard. Microsoft tell us we can put everything on the dashboard. You can put anything you need to on the dashboard. Brilliant. So what are we going to do? We're going to create a one-size-fits-all. Well, that's an option. We could have put 100 tiles on the dashboard, and everybody in the organization might have seen 100 tiles, might have seen 80, and it would have been quite complicated. We were a bit braver. We worked on this for a little while, and we came to the conclusion that the business value for this organization was in supporting the agronomy team. So 200 plus people of a wider organization use the dashboard. If you're in HR, it's available to you. It's not going to really change your day. It's not something you're going to click into and think, oh, brilliant, I'm going to look up the locations and stuff like that. You can, but you're probably not going to need that style of working. So we narrowed in. It's a proper use case that adds the value to the organization for the agronomy team. They, as you saw from the video, they're in the field. They've got a mobile phone in their hand. They haven't got a laptop most of the time. And when they do, it's offline. So dashboard via Teams. So very quickly, we deployed Viva Connections. That gave us the intranet experience straight from the Teams mobile app. So that would be on the resources tab. We've got the feed, which is the Yammer community conversations and the SharePoint news coming from the news center in the Teams experience. And then we've got this dashboard for the agronomy team, which is, again, leveraging the complexity of the audiences and making sure the things I see make sense. So you mentioned the onboarding of an agronomy team. How does that really manifest itself day to day? What does that mean for the sort of more junior members of that team?
It's based a lot on shadowing, because with agriculture and agronomists, it takes a lot of on-hand experience. We can't forget about the duality of the role. You're a very technical person, while at the same time you need to be a salesperson, because an agronomist does everything from beginning to end. You do the in-field assessments, create the prescription, and then are responsible to actually sell the product to the farmer at the end of the day. So it's quite of a round role to get into. That's why I said in the beginning, it takes about 3 years to actually become a full-fledged agronomist, which meant shadowing wasn't necessarily enough, because you can't always pick up the phone and discuss to one of the agronomists. You need quick access to information.
Yeah.
So that's why we've requested something that would help them guide through that journey?
Yeah. So we selected the job guides tile. It's one of our Viva Connections dashboard tiles. And it's a stepped experience. So you come in and you go down a tree of decisions that get you to the content. So when it comes to the highly technical scientific documentation in that 100,000 document area, those job guides allow the senior agronomy team to sort of paint some pathways that a junior agronomist can follow. So you saw there in a quick example, we've kind of stepped into, okay, I need some nutrition information, and eventually I get down to a highly technical document. So it's guided pathways. It's allowing those agronomy team members to share a best practice approach. It also solves one of the other complex problems. There's actually only one person who manages those 100,000 documents. A lady called Anne. She's the agronomy information manager. So she was a little bit fearful initially of like, how do I manage 100,000 documents and make sure they're all right? Well, with this capability, what we've done is we've painted some pathways and we've said, okay, for the wheat agronomy team, this is the set of things that you need to make sure the answer is always right. There's 50 answers in real terms for most of the scenarios. There's 50 answers across. She only has to manage 50 things now every week. So it takes her a couple of hours to move those documents and make sure they're in the right place to get the value out of that experience. And then it's also supporting the seasonality. So that was a pathway through, am I looking at nutrients? Am I looking through different scientific pathways? This particular example is looking at which part of this growing season am I in? So again, it's just solving that problem of, well, how am I thinking today? Do I need to go via the type of product or the soil pH, or do I need to go, it's raining and it's T2 in this particular example, and I go through the growing stages there. So again, it's trying to instill correct behavior in the agronomy team from the dashboard. So this is, again, getting us into crop center and getting us the value out of that crop center as we go across. Now, collections was the next dashboard tile that was deployed into the experience, and you've already talked about collections from supporting the desktop environment. Why was it important in the mobile experience?
Well, this came with its own challenge. Majority of our agronomists do like saving documents locally. So they like downloading a file, printing it sometimes, or just holding it on their phone forever and just using that. This was quite a big issue for us because as a company, legislation always changes in agriculture, so we need to make sure that our agronomists have access to the latest version of the document and actually use it. So we didn't really know how to break them from that, and that's when collections came in conversation because it allowed them to actually bookmark the content that they required, be able to actually build then their own folder structures within OneDrive. So pretty similar to the same thing that they would do on their own computers.
Yeah. So instantly, we've given them the capability to have 200 homepages, which is kind of what they initially asked for. Because if they're visiting a particular farm in Herefordshire and then they're going to a second farm in Herefordshire, they've gathered together information they need to use on that particular visit. Collections is supporting that. They just create a collection, farm A, farm B, put things in it they need, go and do the visit. If they want to keep them, they keep them. If they don't, they delete the collection. And it's not downloaded content. It's kept where it should be. It's all well filed. They've just got pointers to that. So it's just small enablements from that mobile device that again, are changing it. So local information, we looked at the fact there's quite a disparate set of locations, and we needed to build engagement. And I think one of the things that was quite cool about the Viva dashboard is it's location aware. We've got the ability for that tile to know where I'm stood. We've got that ability for the tile to know where I'm stood, what the weather's going to be, and what time of day it is, and we can change information that we present back based on those three factors. So, Andrea, the locations information, we've got different scenario, haven't we, for the mobile experience?
Yeah, absolutely. This was mainly focused on, again, the agronomists. As they move throughout the country, they need to be able to very quickly access the location information, so the actual physical location information, of certain warehouses and offices in order to actually navigate as quickly as possible there.
Yeah. So we've removed cut and paste. We've made it one click straight into the map app for the phone. So you come straight off your dashboard, you can say, locate me, it'll tell you which is the closest depot. You click it, you click navigation, directions, and it launches Waze or Google Maps or Apple Maps. So no cutting and pasting, no translation of the mapping thing. It's all geo coordinates, bang, straight in. So smoothing the path to the use of that location information. And then finally, system status. So it's an incredibly complicated IT landscape, isn't it? Because you manage tons of different data sources and you do analysis of soil and crop yields and all these different systems an agronomy team uses day to day. So why does system status feature on the dashboard?
Well, I think when we started looking into this, it wasn't necessarily an issue for us, but the agronomists put it in front of us because they said, there are so many systems around the company. We never know when they are available. We never know when you have maintenance unless we check our emails. This is how we used to actually send information regarding any kind of changes or downtime of any of our systems. The other issue is that they're not centrally managed, all of them. So they're not IT managed necessarily because some of them are highly technical systems, so databases that are managed by one of the technical R&D people within Agri, which meant we couldn't centrally tell the agronomists when the downtime was necessarily scheduled. So we wanted a central place in which all of the systems were able to have their own status in order to preempt the information required to the agronomists. So if they are in a field, getting ready to go to the customer in order to discuss the offer with them, they check before and they see if the system is actually available in order to be able to pull out a price list to discuss with the customer. That was rather important for us to be able to make sure that everyone has access to the information they require when they require it.
Yeah. And the system status tile there is not only hooked onto things like the M365 service health, it's also enabling those business owners to come and, I'm going to plan to put my system in maintenance because I'm doing a massive data update over the weekend. They can do that as a business owner. So we've done a combination of M365's up and running, internal agri systems are up and running, and they're owned by different parts of the business. So again, it just really helps with that customer experience, doesn't it? The agronomy team member on the ground knows that they can rely upon that price list information at the point that they're stood with the farm customer. So that's our story so far, but we haven't finished, have we? We're definitely not done with the cool things that we can approach. So first off, before we talk about the future, give us some insights into the feedback from the organisation now it's been rolled out.
In all fairness, we didn't expect it to be as good because agronomists, as a role, they're not necessarily very keen to change. So telling them that we're actually implementing a new system and telling them they need to relearn the way that they use it, they kind of took a step back and they say, we don't really like this. What are you going to bring on top of what we already have? So that's why the Viva dashboards was actually an add-on to what we were already planning. We wanted to not only update the old system, the SharePoint on-premise, but also upgrade it, take it to the next level.
Yeah, and that feedback has been big things, little things, and everything in between. And the speed at which we can react to that, now that we've got that cloud platform, moving things around in SharePoint, detach a site from one hub, move it into another, super easy. Change the branding, the pattern. You know, we talked about that brand evolution. Well, day 10's version of the homepage look and feel was slightly different to the day 30. We could react to those changes. We could push those changes out, as well as the actual feedback from the task-based parts of the system. So it's important when you consider rollout and the adoption and usage. It isn't just how many times was it logged in, how many pages were viewed. It's actually how many tasks were supported by that activity. And again, our analytics experiences are helping the agri team to understand which bits are really sort of working. So that's kind of adoption and the feedback. What's next for the dashboard?
I would say increase the engagement that we currently have. So we did say that we've moved the ownership from being IT-centric into being department-centric. We've seen great engagement for some of the departments that we have rolled out in the first phase of the project, and we're looking to hopefully bring the rest of them into the internet in their own locations in order to showcase their information.
Yep.
That would definitely be one of our next steps.
And also we're looking at the training aspects. So lots of the information changes, a lot of annual cycles of re-certification of being able to deploy or sell a particular product, and understanding when you're going to need to prepare to study for that exam to make sure you can still sell product A and product B. So Aviva Tile is shortly going to be deployed around the training and mandatory sort of renewal of those training certificates as well. And that's underneath is leveraging all of those new investments by Microsoft around profiling. So thinking about the skills and project attainment that you've got in the graph now, it's leveraging those pieces. So that's our Agri story so far. It's been a wonderful journey, a very exciting, geeky one for me, because I now know much more about farming than I ever thought was possible. And we've got a real life use case being satisfied with the Aviva dashboard, which I think is really the next step in when it comes to engaging some of your frontline and segments within the organization where the dashboard mobility makes sense. So thank you very much for listening. If you'd like to see more about the dashboard experiences or learn a bit more about the Agri story, we're down on booth 2 in the expo hall, and Andrea and I can certainly take questions and talk to you afterwards. But thank you very much for listening.